In this class, we will show how FortiGate ASIC chips and mezzanine cards accelerate network performance. This includes discussing how processing that is accelerated by specialized hardware is different from processing by traditional general-purpose CPUs. Here's an overview of what we will discuss. We'll explain the logic of how, when, and why FortiGate uses these processors. Because these result in some differences in configuration and expected behavior during diagnostics, we'll show that too. After completing this class, you should have these practical skills. You should be able to use FortiGate features provided by the network processor, known as NP, content processor, known as CP, security processor, known as SP, and system on a chip, or SoC, such as offloaded IP sessions, accelerated IPsec and SSL encryption, and accelerated IPS and antivirus scans. What is hardware acceleration? Normally, almost all processing is handled by the main CPU. But with hardware acceleration, some processing load is distributed to other specialized chips. This offloading frees the CPU to execute the generic tasks more quickly. It also processes some of the workload, whatever is supported by the chip, in parallel. So depending on your traffic, network throughput can really increase. Types of hardware acceleration vary by FortiGate model. Each model has a different chipset. For example, because hardware acceleration is achieved by using specialized hardware which don't exist in virtual machines, it doesn't exist on FortiGate VM. How does FortiGate do hardware acceleration? FortiGate has application-specific integrated circuits, also called ASICs. Fortinet devices can have multiple types of ASIC chips, each designed for a specific workload. Network processors, content processors, security processors. Usually, newer revisions of these chips are faster and can handle more situations, so the CPU can offload more processing to them. But except for chips on PCIe expansion cards, for example, the specialized processors are not easily upgradable. They are wired onto the motherboard. Which ASIC is newest? Chip revision varies by FortiGate model. The chip's name is two initials followed by the revision number. One for the first revision, two for the second revision, and so on. For example, the first revision of Fortinet's network processor is called NP1. What does each ASIC type do? Network processors accelerate packet forwarding, but they do have more features. We'll show these in detail soon. Security processors offload some complex security-related tasks, such as detecting attacks. Content processors offload UTM content inspection. Due to the type of task that they do, they can also be seen as coprocessors. Finally, system-on-a-chip processors combine a traditional system CPU with CP and NP. Now, let's show details of each ASIC type, starting with NP. Which traffic does NP accelerate? For each new session, the first packet always goes to the kernel, which is processed on the CPU. So this first packet is not hardware accelerated. Then, if the session can be offloaded to an available NP, the kernel sends session information to the NP. Requirements vary by NP revision, which we'll show soon. All subsequent packets in that session are forwarded by the NP, not the kernel or CPU. So their transmission is all accelerated. Finally, when the last packet is sent or received, for example with the TCP FIN or TCP reset signal, or if there are errors, then the NP returns this to the CPU so it can tear down the session. 4 revisions of network processors exist. Features vary by revision. The first 3 revisions, NP1, NP2, and NP4, offload most types of IPv4 traffic. So does NP4. But notice that NP4 has up to 5 times better performance than NP1 and NP2. Similarly, NP6 has up to 2 times better performance than NP4. But it also has other very important evolutions. It can offload IPv6, CAPWAP traffic for wireless control and provisioning, and multicast traffic. We'll show the special features in more depth later. How can you see if your FortiGate has network processors? And if it does, how many? Which revision are they? Remember, documentation for your FortiGate model lists the ASICs. Alternatively, use the CLI command get hardware NPU. If you don't know which NP revision, guess. Try, for example, get hardware NPU NP4 list. Output shows how many of those NP processors are present and to which interfaces they are bound. So if there's no output, your FortiGate doesn't have that NP. Try another revision number. So if NP is faster, is there any reason to disable it? We showed briefly that performance varies by NP generation, but features do too. The first 3 NPs don't support traffic statistics, no reports or logs, beyond the first and last packet in the IP session. So if your FortiGate has those NPs and you require SNMP polling, logs, or reports, you might want to disable NP. But the newest generation of NP, NP6, does count per session traffic in bytes. It also supports the Ethernet MIB for SNMP. Logs are one reason why you might choose to manually disable NP offloading, but when will offloading be automatically disabled? To be offloadable to NP4, traffic must match the ASIC chip's design criteria. The layer 2 type length must be set to 0x0800, IEEE 802.1q, and 3AD traffic can also be offloaded. The layer 3 must be IPv4. IPv6 isn't supported by NP4. The layer 4 must be UDP, TCP, SCTP, or ICMP. Multicast isn't supported by NP4. The header or content must not require modification by a session helper, which are implemented in software. Depending on the protocol, active or passive FTP for example, a session helper might be required by NAT. Importantly, traffic must not be inspected by any kind of protection profile, such as antivirus and anti-spam. Also, the traffic must not have originated from the firewall itself either. Finally, and as we saw in the previous slide, ingress and egress ports must be on the same NP4 unless there is an EEI bridge between those NP4s. Similarly, here are the NP6 offloading criteria. Some resemble NP4, but there are many important differences. IPv6 traffic, NAT64, NAT46, multicast, traffic generated locally, and usually traffic that requires a session helper due to NAT. However, sessions requiring UTM inspection such as antivirus still can't be offloaded to an NP6. How do NP requirements impact performance and flow? Let's see a couple of examples. On models with NP4, each physical network interface is bound to a chip. But some FortiGate models have more than one NP4, so traffic from different interfaces might be handled by different NP4s. For example, let's say that your FortiGate has 16 ports. The first 8 ports are hardwired to the first NP4, the other 8 ports are wired to the second NP4. Will traffic between 2 different NP4 chips be hardware accelerated? Let's see an example. Here, port 1 to 8 are bound to the first NP, port 9 to port 16 are bound to the second NP. When both incoming and outgoing from the same NP4, traffic can of course be accelerated because it's handled by the same chip. It knows its own sessions, so it doesn't need to talk to the CPU kernel nor to another NP chip. But when traffic must be forwarded from port 1 to port 15, however, this involves two separate NP chips. So on some FortiGate models, this will be handled by the CPU. But on other models, it won't. Why? On those models, additional circuitry called Enhanced Extension Interface, or EEI, interconnects the NP4s. So the NP4s can communicate, and the kernel can offload the session even if the ingress and egress involve separate NP chips. What about NP6? Remember that NP6 are not bound to a specific network interface. The reason is similar to NP4 models with EEI. All FortiGate models with NP6 have an integrated switch fabric, or ISF, that allows communication between all interfaces and the NP6 processors. So offloading is possible even if ingress and egress are not on the same NP6. Because NP acceleration can make significant performance differences, if your throughput is lower than you expect, investigate your session list for unexpected slow path processing. To do this, use the command diag_sys_session list to list all IP sessions, both CPU and NP processed. Then verify that each session that you expect to be NP accelerated has the NPU info line. For the same reason that NP causes differences in your session list, NP also causes differences during packet capture. On FortiGate, the kernel uses the CPU for packet capture. So once a session is offloaded to NP, the CLI command diag_network_sniffer won't show packets after that. If you require capture of all the session's packets, temporarily disable hardware acceleration. Note that depending on your FortiGate model and configuration, this can significantly decrease performance. So re-enable hardware acceleration once you finish packet capture. Now that we've discussed how NP changes packet flow, let's return to the feature list for the NP family. NP4 and NP6 processors have large performance gains, but they also support more offloading, active-active HA load balancing, IPsec cryptography, link aggregation, pre-IPS, basic traffic shaping. First, let's see how NP improves performance and changes packet flow for active-active HA clusters. In active-active HA, the primary FortiGate causes IP sessions to be load balanced to secondary FortiGates. If session was initiated with the primary, not the secondary, can NP accelerate this? Yes. Processing flow is identical to non-HA traffic until the CPU sends the session information to the NP. In this case, due to active-active HA, the next packets in the session might not be sent to the same NP on the same FortiGate. So session information is also sent to the NP on the HA secondary FortiGate. Subsequent packets are therefore accelerated regardless of whether they arrive at a primary or secondary FortiGate. Next, let's see how NP improves performance for encrypted tunnels. If the tunnel uses supported algorithms, NP processors can apply authenticate hashes, encrypt ESP payloads, and decrypt them for IPsec tunnels. To do this, you must manually configure the local gateway IP setting in Phase 1. By default, this IP address is the primary IP address of the FortiGate interface where the IPsec tunnel terminates. That is, until you configure it, its value is the same as main interface IP. NP requires this to identify security associations. You should also disable IPsec replay detection, which requires memory of prior packets. Note that in some FortiGate models that have both CP and NP processors, ESP decryption can be offloaded to an NP, while the ESP encryption is offloaded to the CP. This improves performance. With 2 chips, FortiGate can do twice the amount of cryptography operations per second. To verify that IPsec traffic is being offloaded, use the CLI command diag VPN tunnel list. This shows the status and statistics for each VPN tunnel. If it contains a line with NPU flag, the tunnel is being offloaded. NP can also accelerate traffic for 802.3 AD link aggregation if all aggregated interfaces are associated with the same NP. To determine if the channel is offloaded, use the CLI command diag netlink aggregate. Will all link aggregation related processing be offloaded? No. Again, offloading doesn't occur until the CPU establishes the session and sends it to the NP. So in the initial phase of hashing, which is how the kernel decides which interface in the aggregate will send the first frame, the CPU is still involved. Offloading occurs after link aggregate hashing. Some NP can also detect some anomalies and drop those packets. This occurs in hardware independently from and before the IPS engine is involved. To do this, configure the interface with set fp-anomaly. For example, you could configure your NP processor to drop packets with an unknown protocol number. Finally, you can offload some types of traffic shaping to NP. NP can limit bandwidth. Queue prioritization is also supported. However, traffic shaping to guarantee bandwidth cannot be offloaded. So if you require that feature, the session must be processed by the kernel. Also, due to limited memory, NP has a smaller number of shaper objects, so for that reason also, traffic shaping by the CPU is more common. The next family of processors we'll talk about is the security processor. Like NP, a security processor can also offload packet transmission. It can offload multicast, IPv4, IPv6, and NAT64 traffic. But SP can do more. As its name indicates, it can do security processing such as flow-based antivirus, web filtering, application control, and inspecting traffic for attacks and match with anomaly signatures. It can act like a SYN proxy. We'll explain that soon. Like NP6, SP can generate logs. Like with NP, features vary by SP revision. Revision 1 can handle IPS and encrypted multicast offloading. Revision 2 added support for application control and other flow-based inspection. Revision 3 boosts performance beyond Revision 2. How can you see if your FortiGate has security processors? Which revision are they? Use the command diag npu spm list. In the example here, XH0 indicates that an FMC XH0 model mezzanine expansion card is installed. From the product family we just listed, we know that these models have SP3. If I've already bought a FortiGate that doesn't have an SP, when should I consider buying an expansion card? Or when should I consider using a FortiGate model with SP? What is the benefit? SP mostly accelerates security-related features. As we discussed for NP, NP doesn't support sessions with most security-related features. Remember that NP can't offload sessions with antivirus. Obviously, antivirus is very popular, and flow-based antivirus improves performance. So because SP2 can offload flow-based antivirus, it can make a very real difference. Flow-based scanning is an important feature of SP. We'll see it used again with IPS. Note that if a virus is detected and removed by an SP, however, users can't receive the replacement message, and not all signatures may be supported. That is the performance trade-off. Similar to flow-based antivirus scans, SP can also do flow-based IPS scans. First, you configure inspection in the firewall policy, not on the interface itself. Second, ingress and egress interfaces must be bound to the same SP. But what if attacks that aren't a worm or exploit? What if you want to look for traffic volume anomalies? Without any specific configuration, FortiGate will also offload rate-based IPS. This is effective against high-bandwidth denial-of-service attacks. It can also indicate non-denial-of-service problems such as spam zombies on your internal network. Remember, unlike many NP, SP can generate logs. So for example, you may want SP to log anomalies on your internal network, but not from the external internet. As always, with rate limiting, be careful with the thresholds. Study your network first. Determine what is the normal rate. If you configure a threshold that is too low, then the SP will drop traffic even when it is at normal levels. But if the threshold is too high, then SP will not detect many real anomalies. An SP can also block SYN floods. A TCP SYN flood is essentially a flow of traffic where SYN is received from the client, but after responding and waiting, your FortiGate doesn't receive any ACK from the client. So according to the TCP protocol, the connection is only half built. The half-baked connection would normally remain in memory until the client acknowledges the server's acknowledgement. This would allow malicious clients to consume small bits of memory with each partially formed connection attempt, eventually exhausting available memory or sockets. So instead, FortiGate acts as a proxy for the server and drops connections that the client hasn't completed by the timeout. The SPTCP proxy is a good example of how well implemented hardware can accelerate both network and security processing. Let's show how it works. During the three-way TCP handshake between a client and server that establishes and confirms a connection, first, the client sends a SYN signal. Second, the SP on your FortiGate replies to the client with an ACK signal, so your server doesn't directly reply. Instead, FortiGate waits for the ACK from the client. Third, if the client sends an ACK before the timeout, and normally this completes very quickly, in less than a second, then it completes the handshake. So the SP forwards the connection entry to the kernel, and therefore to the FortiGate CPU and RAM, after which FortiGate forms a secondary TCP connection with your backend server once the handshake has finished. But what if the client doesn't complete its connection on time? If your network has some packet loss, then the client might retry. But it's not normal for networks to have severe packet loss where a client sends, for example, 100 SYN signals that never complete. In that case, SP begins to drop the half-formed connections. So SP completely prevents the SYN flood from consuming other resources. SP saves not only your server, but also your FortiGate CPU and RAM. Notice that the SP ASIC performed some of the processing that the CPU would normally do, but it also protected the FortiGate and server from this attack. If you've configured your FortiGate to proxy TCP SYN signals, it will automatically offload to your SP. No additional configuration is required. Now let's talk about content processors. Fortinet has produced the CP family for a long time. CP4 is not new, but reasonably modern and still supported, so we'll start there. CP4 has basic features to accelerate IPsec, since tunnel encryption can significantly lower performance. CP4 can generate pseudo-random numbers, encrypt and decrypt DES, triple DES, and AES, calculate SHA-1 and MD5 checksums for message authentication, validate RSA public keys in PKCS1 certificates. It also has a content processing engine. CP5 added FIPS and RFC compliance and improved IPsec offloading with support for IKE and RSA. Additionally, its random number generator is compliant with SSL, which would become especially relevant to the next generation, CP6. In CP6, the two biggest changes were performance and the ability to offload SSL inspection. With the growing popularity of SSL VPN and HTTPS, this is vital to performance. The newest generation is CP8. It adds an IPS engine for pattern matching, that is, IPS signatures, expands cryptographic support with newer algorithms such as ARC4 and SHA-256, and large public keys. Additionally, CP8 performs much more impressively, and CP8 chips can be stacked for scalable solutions. The CLI command getHardwareStatus can be used to determine the CPU revision a FortiGate unit has. Finally, we are going to talk about the integrated processor, which is also called System on a Chip. The System on a Chip combines a general-purpose CPU with Fortinet's custom ASIC processors NP, SP, and CP into a single chip. System on a Chip is usually found in smaller FortiGate models intended for desktop and small offices because it can't handle a carrier-grade computing load, but the benefit is that it requires less power and is therefore more energy efficient and cost-effective. So it's an option for organizations that want to save on their power bill, eliminate office heat and noise, or that have green computing initiatives. With the CP8 and partial NP Fortinet ASIC chips that are integrated onto a System on a Chip, it can accelerate IP session handling, IPS scans, IPsec cryptography, and SSL. A System on a Chip basically integrates three ASICs. The VPN module includes the SSL, TLS, and IPsec engines, which handle the encryption and decryption of traffic and the message authentication algorithms. The NP Lite module is a light version with fewer features of an NP processor. It basically accelerates IP session handling. The IPS Deterministic Finite Automate DFA module is used to offload some IPS signature matching.